we believe maybe very, very strongly that yours is the right one, but that's different from, the universe saying, Islam is the right one, or Christianity is the right one, or Judaism is the right one. It's just a person's belief. And
yeah. I can just with my experience, I don't know about you, but like coming across people, I would say even if the universe said that okay, this religion is the right one, a person going through scrupulosity can say I'm still doubting that.
Absolutely, that you got it. That's right, and that's why trying to have that guarantee is futile. It will never work.
So you are saying that this is a disorder.
Yeah.
So a person, how can he self-diagnose and understand if his concerns related to faith are actually coming under a mental disorder or actually genuine? If you can help flesh that out.
Great question.
Welcome back to Incisive Thoughts. And today we have something very groundbreaking, something that is the need of our time. And today's guest is going to be very, very special. So today I'm actually delighted and honored to welcome Dr. Jon Abramowitz to discuss with him a very important and crucial topic that is something that needs to be addressed in our time. So Dr. Jonathan is actually a professor of psychology and psychiatry at the University of North Carolina, where he directs the anxiety and stress disorder clinic. He is one of the world's leading experts on OCD and anxiety-related conditions with over 300 publications to his name. That's a big achievement. He is a past president of the Association of Behavioral and Cognitive Therapies and former editor of the Journal of Obsessive-compulsive and Related Disorders. His work has significantly shaped how clinicians understand and treat OCD today. So I'm delighted to welcome such an honored guest.
Thank you,
Dr. Jon.
It's the honor.
Welcome to Incisive Thoughts.
Yeah. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here, to be talking.
So the topic I think is very interesting. People might not understand. So I'll try to clarify and the context of the topic, which is very important. Today's conversation centers on religious scrupulosity with intrusive moral or spiritual doubts, sometimes mistaken for genuine crisis of faith. And someone who regularly works with individuals, like for me, as I am a person who regularly works with individuals navigating through theological questions, doubts, mental health struggles, I often see people misdiagnosing themselves. Some are genuinely wrestling with spiritual doubts. Others are grappling with obsessive fears that mimic those doubts but arise from a different place. So we will unpack what scrupulosity looks like. That's a big word, but doctor will explain what that is and how it differs from sincere religious reflection and how faith and evidence-based treatment can work hand in hand. So the first thing that I want to talk about, like the first question, is what is scrupulosity?
Yeah. So the definition, scrupulosity is a Latin term, and the definition is literally seeing sin where there is none. So when people have scrupulosity, they view themselves as being sinful, culpable, guilty, when according to their own religious faith, they're not really. So a religious leader or a fellow, practitioner of their religion would say, no, you haven't done anything wrong. But the person believes that they've done something sinful.
So what does scrupulosity looks like for a person who's going through it? So, like, correct me if I'm wrong. Is it like a person who thinks that, okay, I'm doing something wrong, but in actuality, in a faith context or in a general context, he's not?
Yeah, so it looks different depending on the person's religion, for example. So in the US, we have a lot of folks who are Christian, right? It's the majority religion. And one of the tenets of Christianity is that you have to believe with all your heart that Jesus Christ is your savior. And there's some pretty strict, depending on your denomination, there's some pretty strict interpretation of that. And so you might have someone who just has some idea like, maybe that's wrong, maybe that's incorrect. Or maybe they have some sort of an image of an unpleasant, image of Jesus. And there's a story about Jesus's mother, who is Mary, and according to the story, she was a virgin. And so a person might have like a sexual image about Mary, unwanted thoughts. And generally speaking, according to Christianity, God is forgiving. And if you have a thought like that, you repent, say a prayer, and you're fine. But some people who have scrupulosity, they think, I'm going to hell because of this. God won't understand. There's no way to be forgiven. Similarly, for people who are Jewish, there's some very strict rules about dietary laws, what you can eat, what you can't eat. And a Jewish person might think, well, if I even think about eating something that's forbidden, that's the same as committing a sin. And so it's just kind of excessive, and then these people engage in excessive reassurance seeking, excessive praying, excessive religious confession, religious behavior, that even their spiritual leader would say, you don't have to do that, but the person believes they have to.
Okay. Yeah. So I get what you're saying. And I think this is also something I see within the Muslim community as well. They sometimes go through these thoughts, these intrusive thoughts, and they think that they are sinful just because they have the thought. But the thought is not within our control.
Right. Yeah, we're talking about things that are normal human experiences, unwanted thoughts, mistakes, right? And we also see people from who practice Islam who they, what if I didn't wash my hands the right way? What if I had an unwanted thought about God or Allah or Muhammad? And they beat themselves up over things that, Muslims generally would say, that's okay. God is forgiving. God understands.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So within our tradition also, like we are like, we are not held accountable for any random thought that comes to our mind. Maybe we can unpack that later regarding what the religious perspective is. But what is very interesting is, maybe I want to go a bit more deeper in this topic. So what I have seen is this is not just related to some acts, but like, for example, what I do is on my platform is actually help people navigate through doubts they have. And I come across many different kind of people who have different kinds of doubts. And some people have genuine doubts and they require an answer where you give them some knowledge, where you actually provide them the right answer, they are satisfied. But then there are some other people who just happen to not find any kind of answer satisfactory.
Exactly.
And then you just explain to them, okay, you give them an answer on a beginner level. Okay, so then they might think about it, and then they might, let's say, they need more. You give them an answer on an intermediate level, and sometimes even on an advanced level, which sometimes goes deep into philosophy and theology. And that is generally a person does not even think about those things on such a deep level, like a cutting edge answer you provide them, and still they feel that, no, there's some issue, I still don't feel satisfied. This is where I think that maybe the issue that they are going through is not actually related to the doubt, but something that's a deeper problem. And that also turns out to be, when I look at their history, like, I ask them, they're like, okay, no, I've been going through doubts for 2-3 years. And if I overcome this doubt particularly, another doubt would crop into my head. So I want to know, now I understand that this is not actually an issue related to the particular faith or the question, but something deeper. So what is going on with this individual, if you can unpack that?
Yeah, so it's possible that they have a type of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. And what OCD is, it's a mental disorder, a psychiatric condition where people have unwanted thoughts and they get stuck on their thoughts. And most people, look, we all have unwanted thoughts about things that are important to us, whether it's your religion or your family or, whatever. And most people are able to discount those and say, oh, that's just a senseless thought. I'm moving on. People with OCD, they get into a fight with their thoughts and they start to do compulsive rituals. They try to get reassurance. They try to make the thought go away. They try to make themselves feel better about the thought in a way that is excessive. So they are trying to get a 101% guarantee, in this case of scrupulosity, that they're okay with God, that they haven't committed a sin. They're trying to get a level of certainty that is not even possible. Right? That's what faith is about. Faith is, we don't have certainty, so we have faith when it comes to, most things, especially religion. And these people get into a vicious cycle where the more they try to fight their thoughts and get a guarantee, the more they worry about it. And it just goes over and over and over again.
So that's very interesting when you say something like this. And I'll just give you one example, a hypothetical example. Like I come across many such people. So when you say that faith is taken to be that faith brings in some kind of uncertainty, I agree with that. But there's one thing that we can actually rationally ground faith, I believe. I strongly believe that.
Yeah.
But then at one point, like if you're going through someone who's maybe having this issue or seems to have a potential aligning to this issue, like for example, if you provide them all the rational evidences for faith, or if they're doubting faith, for example, and everything that's out there, and you provide them logical arguments, they might go on a level where they start to question logic itself. Say, but how can I be sure? Why do I have to accept these kind of logical principles altogether? So you are saying that this is a disorder.
Yeah.
So a person who actually is thinking that he has some he has issues with his faith, how can he self-diagnose and understand if his concerns related to faith are actually coming under a mental disorder or actually genuine? If you can help flesh that out.
Great question. The way that we diagnose it is that if it's taking up time, like excessive amounts of time and taking away from the person's life, if it's causing a great deal of distress, right? Religion is supposed to be practiced out of love, right? And faith, it's not supposed to, at least I think most religions believe, it's not supposed to cause distress and anxiety and fear. So at least for us in the psychiatric community, when someone is experiencing excessive anxiety and fear and it's getting in the way of their life, maybe they can't practice their religion the way it's intended to. We have people who avoid going to their worship services because they're afraid I'm going to have a negative thought, right? Or they're afraid to read the Bible because they think I'm going to get triggered by something I read. And that's the opposite of what religion is. So when a person has that kind of a struggle, that's when we diagnose it as OCD, as a disorder. But I will say that it's not black and white. It's very much a gray area. And there are debates about, when does it turn into a disorder? It's not clear all the time.
Right. And maybe a combination of both might be required, that you try to treat your mental disorder at the same time. You also try to find rational answers or gain some kind of knowledge, which can help you to get some certainty related to faith.
What we have found is that most people have gone through that. They've met with religious leaders. They have tried the logic. They have kind of like what you were saying. They've tried to tackle this from a religious perspective and from a rational perspective. And that doesn't always work, as you know. And in fact, sometimes what that can do is make the person even more, anxious, because now they start to think about all these other things, all these philosophical things. And
Right.
maybe we'll talk about this later, but the treatment that we use is kind of the opposite of that. We want people to learn how to be more faithful by not needing to have the truth, by not needing to have a guarantee. And to learn, most people, are able to put their faith in God and in religion, and that they don't require an ironclad guarantee of the truth. They're able to just kind of move on, believing what they believe
Right. So this is very interesting, and I thought maybe of getting to this point, which is why I have realized that people who actually like sincerely going through this issue, even advising them to research more increases the problem rather than decreases the problem,
in. It can.
because that becomes a compulsion at times.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, that's what people have been doing to try to get their reassurance. And so it's kind of like, yeah, you're just kind of adding on to that if you try, really hard to give them those, the logic and the reassurance and all that.
Right. So maybe we can, unpack that for later. Just one important question that I have is, I would firstly like, give you some examples of what kind of doubts are generally there within the Muslim community that I come across that people are going through. And then maybe move on to some specific ones, and I would try to see like, how you can help them. So generally it, from my own perspective, I see some people go through constant blasphemous images in their head, and they find that is an issue. Some just repeat acts of worship because they think they have not done it properly, or God might have not accepted them because they felt that there's something missing in their act of worship, or something is wrong. Some people are in a constant state of purity or impurity. They think that, oh, I'm not pure, I have to clean myself again. This kind of ritual purity. Then one person, like, it goes on to that level where a person is just questioning if he actually is within the boundaries of faith or not. And then there's more, like there is also where people can think, oh, my religion is true or not, I'm not sure, I need 100% certainty related to that. And does all of this come, like all of these can be symptoms of scrupulosity, like OCD of scrupulosity? Yes or no?
Absolutely. Those are the classic symptoms of scrupulosity. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what I learned from your work and is that you say that all of this is stemming from one thing, which is an intolerance to uncertainty. So doing an act, for example, or at least some of them, like doing an act of worship, like, you cannot be 100% sure, oh, God, like, it is 100% accepted and there were no mistakes. There would be some uncertainty, like, how in terms of the act that you did, or in terms of your purity as well. So why is it the case that a person who's going through OCD of scrupulosity, they want this kind of extraordinary level of uncertainty?
Yeah. Well, so I think intolerance of uncertainty is a major part of it. There are also some other beliefs that we've done research that people have when they have scrupulosity. And one is that they have this fear that God is like looking for you to mess up and is going to is looking to get you. Like God is punishing, and he's vengeful, and he's just waiting for you to mess up so that he can throw the lightning bolt at you. Which, of course, most religions don't believe that. Like some do, but most religions don't. And then also, well, I guess kind of along the idea that they are afraid that God will be unforgiving. You have one chance, and that's it. And I think that combined with intolerance of uncertainty, the way that I look at it is that people who have this problem, they've lost faith in faith. So so like when you say a prayer, or let's just take that. When you say a prayer, you do a religious ritual, God doesn't say, yes, you did it properly, and we're good, and we have a good relationship, I love you. That's not, God is not going to say that. It's up to the person to have faith, to have a private experience that is, that's how it's supposed to go. And sometimes people with scrupulosity, to them, that faith is not enough. They feel like they need to have a guarantee. And so if they have even a small doubt, well, maybe I some thought entered my head when I was praying. Some random thought entered my head while I was praying. I need to do it again because God's going to be upset. And what happens is then they, in praying again, they're going to have the same thought because they're afraid of that. And so they have to do it again, and they repeat it over and over and over again. And so it's a combination of these factors that are kind of happening that play into, how this becomes a problem.
Wow. So yeah, I get it. And so what you say is it's combination of intolerance of uncertainty,
Yeah.
and along with that, being a bit hopeless. That is, in some sense, losing hope in some sense, or having a pessimistic in some sense.
Hopeless, and I would say kind of a distorted view of your religion's perspective on God. Like people who have scrupulosity, whether they're Muslim or Christian or Jewish or Hindu or whatever, they're not really practicing their religion. They have distorted their religion into something where faith isn't good enough. They need to have an ironclad guarantee about their relationship with God. That's just not possible. That's not the way the supernatural works, right? We have faith. We have our beliefs that we've been taught by our religion. We don't have a guarantee. There are hundreds of religions, probably thousands of religions. We don't have a guarantee that any of them are the right one. We believe maybe very, very strongly that yours is the right one, but that's different from, the universe saying, Islam is the right one, or Christianity is the right one, or Judaism is the right one. It's just a person's belief. And
I can, just with my experience, I don't know about you, but like coming across people, I would say, even if the universe said that, okay, this religion is the right one, a person going through scrupulosity can say, I'm still doubting that.
Absolutely. That you got it. That's right. And that's why trying to have that guarantee is futile. It will never work. And we can talk about what we do for treatment, but it's very different than trying to get a guarantee. Yeah.
Right.
You make a really good point. You're absolutely right.
Yeah. So one thing that I want you to address, I think, which is very important even before going into the kind of nuances, is generally when I come across such people who are going through this, and I try to see all of the kind of in their track record, try to understand maybe this is just scrupulosity and nothing else, and they show all of the signs, and then I tell them, okay, understand that what you're going through, maybe you think this is a crisis of faith, or what you think that or you feel hopeless. What you're going through, the kind of treatment that you have to seek is not in researching or learning more logic or doing more philosophy, but rather in trying to treat this disorder by some kind of cognitive behavioral therapy, some kind of exposure prevention, exposure response prevention, something along those lines. But they think that I am just trying to delude them, or this is just some kind of apologetical, evading. So how would you address that? Okay, now you are a clinical professional who's one of the lead, on the cutting edge, leading level. You can say that I'm okay. I'm helping out with, I'm helping people out with just some people going through issues with faith. So maybe I'm not the right person who is so credible to say this. So what would you say to that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And that comes up for me all the time in my work. And people will ask me about my own religious background. And I don't tell them, because then if I'm not the same as them, they're not going to trust me. And if I am the same as them, then the therapy is going to become about the religion. Well, do you do that? So what I like to explain is that the goal of therapy, of course, we are not going to violate any of your religious beliefs. We're not going to do anything that's in contrast to what your religious beliefs are. What we're going to do is exercises to help you become more faithful at your own religion, so that you can practice your own religion out of love, out of faith, the way that your relatives practice, the way that your friends and other members of your religion practice it, and your spiritual leaders practice it. There are books that have been written by religious people about how they've overcome scrupulosity by doing exposure and response prevention. And so I've prescribed people to read those books if they don't trust what I'm saying. The one that comes to mind, there's a Catholic person, a Catholic priest, who wrote a book about how he overcame OCD by doing exposure therapy. And he talks about how important it is to rely on faith rather than a guarantee. And, sometimes that helps people, sometimes it doesn't. I will say that out of all the different types of OCD, scrupulosity is challenging to treat because exactly what we're talking about. People belong to these communities and they feel really strongly, and the punishment can be pretty harsh. Like hell sounds like a bad place.
Right. That's a brilliant point.
Yeah.
But you would say, being a professional, a clinical professional at the cutting edge level, that yes, this is actually a problem that people go through, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, yeah, this is not something that people of faith have just come out with just to actually evade some kind of question or something like that. This is actually a genuine psychological disorder that people go through.
It's a genuine psychological disorder, absolutely. And thank goodness it's pretty rare. We're talking like 2% of people. The vast majority of people and the vast majority of religious people have no difficulties with this. It's just that, when you have this intolerance of uncertainty and these beliefs, these very rigid beliefs about God and things like that can lead to it.
Okay, that's very interesting. I will just give you my example. Maybe we can start from there, so that it would be good. I have been a person who's myself experienced scrupulosity to some extent.
Okay.
So this is why maybe I can sometimes even empathize with other people who are going through it. But so my issue was related to some kind of ritual purity that I got into, and so this is how I explain to people. And correct me anywhere you think I'm wrong, because I'm just a layman when it comes to this. So I give them my own example. But what happened is, when I used to, so we have this kind of ritual purity kind of ablution that we do before a prayer. And when I used to do that, I explained to them that this emanates from intrusive thoughts. Everyone goes through different kind of intrusive thoughts. I don't think some person can say that, oh, I did never experience any intrusive thoughts.
Right.
And then I tell them, okay, these intrusive thoughts are emanating from maybe some kind of insecurity, some kind of innate fear that you have. Probably everyone will have some kind of innate fear and insecurity. Mine was, let's say, what if this act of ritual purity that I'm doing is not accepted by God, or I make some error in this, and if I do some error in this, maybe then it becomes redundant altogether. So I give a lot more importance to this just what if question, which I shouldn't have. But then when I gave it, we generally, when we do an act of purity, we what is prescribed in our religion is doing it, washing it 3 times is good. But then I was like, okay, I've washed it 3 times. For example, my own hand, I've washed it 3 times, but I just feel that what if I've not done it properly? I'll do it the 4th time. I'll do it the 5th time. And then I allowed myself to go into that loophole, and I did it like once or twice or thrice extra. So what happened in this whole process was, I had an innate fear. That innate fear gave me some kind of an obsession. That obsession gave me some kind of anxiety, some kind of discomfort. And then me repeating that was just to remove that kind of anxiety that I had. But what happened is, okay, in this whole process, I repeated once, twice or thrice. I felt better. But then the next day, or in the long process, I got the same obsession, but this time it was stronger. And because it was stronger, I had to repeat it more than 3 times. I had to repeat it like 10 times. And this is how I went into this whole vicious cycle of repeating my hands, to the point where I think sometimes I used to do it constantly for like 15 to 20 minutes. And then I cannot just get out of it, because now the obsession is so strong that the compulsion previously used to give me temporary relief, but now that is also not working. Then I understood my religious scripture, like, understood from a religious perspective that, okay, you are not allowed, you're not recommended to do it more than 3 times. And if I would have stopped and not entertained that thought in the start, I might have not got into this entire roller coaster of the issue.
Yeah.
So is that a correct categorization of what people go through and how it should be prevented in some sense?
Yeah, that's a good description of scrupulosity. Sorry that you've gone through that, but that is exactly what we're talking about. That's very similar to what we would see, just variations depending on the person's religion, right? It's very specific, obviously, to the person's religion.
Yeah, so this is not like a issue with someone's particular religion, but rather people from any faith can go through it with any kind of particular issue, right?
Absolutely, that's right. The processes are the same. It's just that one of the things about religion is that there aren't ironclad guarantees. I know I keep coming back to saying this, but as with most things in life, like I'm in my office, I drove here today. I didn't have a guarantee that I would make it safely, right? People die in car accidents every day, and I'm going to drive home at the end of the day, and I might not make it. I have to have faith that I'm going to get home safely. And when people practice religion, God, no one knows God personally, I mean, we know God personally, but what I'm saying is that, how do I want to say this? When people have scrupulosity, their demand for certainty about supernatural things is more than what's even possible in the natural world.
Wow.
Right.
Okay.
So you would feel like, well, maybe I did the ritual incorrectly. I better do it again. And because you wanted a guarantee that you were doing it properly, that God was satisfied, I guess, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that I did this properly, that I'm okay with God, my relationship with God is okay, is what a lot of people worry about. But God's never, going to say, hey, you're okay, you did it right. That doesn't happen. We have to have faith that God understands, that God is loving, that God knows what's in your heart. And people who have scrupulosity, they've kind of lost that faith. They feel like they need to go beyond that. Faith isn't good enough for me. I got to have that guarantee. And so you do it over and over again.
And that guarantee is a kind of an impossibility that can never occur in any sense.
Impossible. Of course, it's impossible. So the person gets stuck in this endless loop, and you can see how it can get out of control because you're looking for this guarantee that you'll never get. And it takes up a lot of time, and it causes a great deal of distress. And the person walks around with a dark cloud over their head. God doesn't like me. I'm, like you said, I'm hopeless. Or in some religions, I'm going to hell, or I'm not going to heaven. And it can cause depression and all sorts of problems.
Right.
Yeah.
So I completely get what you're saying, and I'm really glad that the kind of thoughts that I had, and like how I try to explain it to people. When you're affirming that, it feels good that, okay, so I was on the right track in terms of guiding people in some sense. Yeah. Now what I want to ask you is, I give you one example which is of my own, which of course it took me some time to get out of that whole loop. But then what I commonly see is not people coming across who's going through some kind of ritual impurity, but rather more to do with stuck in thought ruminations, where their compulsion is just trying to fight a thought, which is that, what if my religion is not true, or what if life is meaningless and life is purposeless and stuff like that. So is this the same, or is this something different?
Good question. It's the same. And the difference is that the mental ritual, the mental rumination, the cognitive ritual, you can't see it. So it's not like repeating a prayer or washing your hands again, but the person is doing it in their mind as a way of trying to reassure, trying to figure it out, trying to analyze it, trying to, put things right. And mental rituals are very common in OCD and can be just as debilitating because the person can't focus and be in the moment and experience, their life because they're stuck in their head.
Exactly. And this is a very big issue, like, people don't take seriously. Like, I'm glad that, we are able to talk about this here. Uh, I come across people. So, what I do is I have this platform where anyone has any doubt regarding religion, sometimes they can approach me. And I work also for an organization that does something similar. So I'm coming across people who are having these kind of questions. And then some people, when I speak to them, like, I understand, okay, there are genuine questions, okay, we can deal with them. And, some minority chunk, I wouldn't even say a fully minority, but I would say more than 10% or 20% people I come across are actually having some issue related to this. And they explain to me what kind of life they are going through, what kind of lifestyle there is. And they say that throughout the day, they're not doing anything. They have their phone screen in their hand. And like, this is a general pattern that I see. And they just scroll through stuff, or maybe they might read books or research because they just want to reassure themselves that, maybe life is meaningful or their faith is true. How would you help them? I feel so bad for these people that, okay, now I'm trying to give you all of the rational proofs, but that is not going to work because your issue is something completely different.
Yes.
So how can Dr. Jonathan, how can you help these people? How can you give them the right path?
Yeah. So we use a set of techniques that are part of cognitive behavior therapy that you mentioned before, CBT. And these techniques are called exposure and response prevention. And what that means is approaching your fears. That's what exposure is. Instead of trying to push it away or avoid it, you're approaching it. And response prevention means resisting that urge to do the research or the mental rituals or the extra rituals, religious rituals. And there's a lot of work that goes into explaining this to the person. We've talked about a little bit of it, right? Explaining this idea that the idea of therapy is to get better at having faith, is to be a better practitioner of your religion rather than this religion that you've made up where you have to have a guarantee of everything. And in exposure, what we would do is, and I was taking some notes when you were talking about your own experience, so you would do what's prescribed, in the Quran or whatever, religion you're following. And then when those doubts come in, what if I didn't do it properly? What if God's not satisfied? What if I had a stray bad thought or something like that? That's what we would do exposure to. That's what we would lean into, right? So I did what I'm supposed to do, and now I'm going to let myself have those doubts. Maybe I didn't do it perfectly, and so that's exposure. And response prevention is, and I'm not going to look stuff up. I'm not going to do mental rituals. Instead, I'm going to do something that I value in my life, whether it's spending time with friends or family, or going to work, or, playing a game, or, whatever it is. And I'm going to lean into those doubts, and I'm going to practice having faith that God understands. I'm going to use what I believe about my religion, what I've been taught, what the, in your case, what the Quran teaches. And I am going to rely on that rather than looking stuff up and all of that. This is very challenging. And at first, people don't want to do it. And that's why I say this, this doesn't always work for people. It's not a panacea. It doesn't cure everybody. But if you can get people to try it and be consistent for a little while, what they will often say is, I'm learning that I'm better at having faith, that I can live with whatever, perceived imperfection. And I have faith that God understands and that God loves me and that I don't have to be so perfect like I've been demanding. And my life is a lot better because I'm spending less time, trying to do these things correctly in a way that's impossible. So it can work, but the person has to be willing to do it, which is why we spend a lot of time in the beginning laying the foundation before we do the exposure.
Wow, that is brilliant. So it is kind of in line with what I had thought it would, like, the solution would be.
Yeah.
This makes perfect sense. So the first step, I think what you're trying to explain is firstly convincing the individual to actually understand that the issue that he's going through, the solution might be the complete opposite of what he's doing.
Right.
This is what I also try to explain, that once you've diagnosed yourself, or if you even if you have a potential, because they might say that, oh, I'm not, how can I be sure that I have this issue, and they might go into that thought altogether. So
Yeah.
even if there is some doubt related to, or some potential that you might have go through this issue, why don't you try inhibiting your compulsions for some time and see if that has an effect or impact on you or not?
Yeah. And it's
Is
kind
that
of, absolutely, that's exactly right. And we, the discussions might be like, how well are your strategies working? How much, how good does that make you feel about
on?
God, right? And if they're being honest, they'll say it doesn't work, and I only feel worse about my religion, and I've thought about giving it up, and I'll say to someone, well, that's a shame. Your religion is a beautiful thing, and it's supposed to bring happiness. And you probably know lots of people who practice your religion. They don't worry about the things you worry about, and they're very happy. And wouldn't you like to be like them? So we kind of talk about how futile it is for them to be doing what they're doing. And then, well, maybe we need a new approach.
Right. So that's brilliant. That one more thing you mentioned is maybe just trying to help them look at things pragmatically and practically seeing what works.
Yeah.
Like, okay, you're thinking too much. Maybe just see what works. Like, if this does not work, maybe try something like this, which is just inhibiting your not doing any compulsions, exposing yourself to that anxiety and not doing anything about it.
Right. And we never ask them to blatantly commit a sin. Like, don't wash your hands only 2 times. We would never do that. Or a Jewish person, don't keep kosher, right? Eat a cheeseburger, which is forbidden in Judaism, because milk and meat, you don't eat it together.
Yeah.
We would never ask someone to violate their religion. What we're asking them to do is to allow themselves to have the doubts that they regularly have, but they're going to respond differently to them, now, instead of what they've been doing.
Right. That's brilliant. And this is where I just want to bring out one example that I generally use with these people.
Yeah.
So I'm not like of course a professional, and I always try to direct them to professionals in terms of when I diagnose that they are going through this issue. But just giving them an introduction to what they are going through, when they think that when I tell them that they're going through this, they're going through a mental disorder. Like, generally there's a stigma within some of our community. Think that, oh, mental disorder, they take it offensively. Oh, you think that I'm crazy? Oh,
Right.
how can you say that? So I try to give them an example. I'm like, okay, just imagine the world's fastest runner, which is Usain Bolt, for example. No one can beat him. Let's say he has, so this is a thought experiment. Like, let's say he has a leg injury and he broke his leg, for example. He broke his left leg. What is his doctor going to recommend? Maybe he might be the fastest runner in the world, but for this year's Olympics, he cannot run. The best thing for him is to stop doing all of his running activities and rest so that he gets better. And then maybe the next Olympics he can join, because this one he cannot join. So they say, yeah. So I'm like, I asked them, okay, if you were, let's say if you are a very good doctor and you are treating this guy, this fastest runner, and they're like, okay, we would advise them the same thing. So I tell them, okay, so when it comes to you, I think you are going through a similar issue. Usain Bolt has a fracture on his leg. You might have a mental fracture. You might be the most intelligent person in the world. No one is questioning your intelligence. But it's just that now you are going through some kind of fracture. And the best thing for you is not running for some time. And then maybe if you like researching, if you want to know the truth of reality, you can do that. Maybe you can give them, you can give yourself like a 3 months break and start. And then after that, maybe you can go back to what you like doing. And then I tell them that they think about it. And some of them, they can't in the first few days, they can't do it for like 3 months straight, but even if they do it for like a week, they come back and they say, oh yeah, I felt a lot better. So do you think using such examples can be helpful?
I like that one a lot. You don't even have to say this is a mental disorder, especially if that's, if people don't like that, if there's a stigma around that. You can say, you can just explain the process. Here's what happens, and here's how, like you were saying, everyone has thoughts that go against their beliefs. Everyone does. And most people, even most people who practice your religion, they're able to put those thoughts, they're able to make room for those thoughts and kind of see them just for what they are. They're mental noise. But for you, it's working a little differently. And there's some reasons that becomes a problem for you. And then explaining what we've talked about. And so you don't even, if the person isn't going to respond well to being told they have a disorder, you can just explain the process and what we need to do to reverse that process too. But I love your analogy. That's great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So also, this could also take us to something where a person who's not going through this issue think that he's going through this issue and stop him trying to look for a solution that is not meant for him. So how can a person who's actually genuinely faith of seeker of faith and is just wants to maybe pursue faith, who's sincerely trying to pursue faith, what are some things that he can see in his life which would be good indicators that he's not going through this issue? Okay, if you can.
Yeah, that's
some example.
I mean, I don't see too many of those people. Maybe people who would do more faith counseling see those folks.
Yeah.
But I for people who, I think it's great to be more faithful and more religious if that's what you want to be, and as long as it just doesn't start to take up time, get in the way of relationships, get in the way of your, other things in your life, I think that's okay.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And one thing I've noticed is like a person who's just for example, a person who likes to gain knowledge, when so I generally ask them if you're reading this book, okay, why are you reading this book? And the person would say, oh, I like reading. Oh, I like to gain knowledge. Okay, so maybe this is a good sign that, because you have a good feeling and this is like a hobby for you. But then there'll be another person like, no, I have to read this because there's some issue that I like, some anxiety. And when I read this, maybe this helps me with the anxiety.
Yeah.
So can a person who likes to gain knowledge and he is reading a book, and a person, for example, who does those ritual acts and he has this good feeling, he feels peaceful, is that person, can we say that person is maybe on a good track and compared to a person who has just anxiety and all of those acts are just to remove the anxiety?
Exactly. That's right. If they're reading the book in a desperate way out of fear, I got to do this. Don't bother me. I've got to do this. Otherwise, something terrible is going to happen. I'm going to be punished or something like that. Then that's a problem. If they're, of course, if they enjoy it, I want to read about religion and learn more, and it's out of my love and my faith, that's wonderful.
Okay, that is brilliant. I'm glad that this conversation is not fully structured, more back and forth, and we are able to cover a lot with this.
Yeah.
So one thing I want to go to, maybe I can try adding this on the stage. Okay. So from within our religion, what do we call these intrusive thoughts? Are whisperings. And
I've heard about this. Yeah.
Yeah. So these whisperings is, so within the time of our prophet, there were some people who were going through this, and we get two narrations where what the prophet prescribed. And I just want to see, because I feel this is also a kind of exposure response prevention, a sort of that. So I'll read one of the narrations, which is, it was narrated by Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, said, some of the companions of the messenger of Allah came to the prophet and said to him, we find in ourselves thoughts that are too terrible to speak of. He said, are you really suffering from this? They said, yes. He said, this is a clear sign of faith.
Yeah.
So he actually did not disencourage them, but explained to them that you should not see this as a bad thing altogether. This is actually a sign of faith because you have this kind of psychological aversion to those thoughts.
Yeah.
And in the next narration, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
So the next narration, it is narrated by Abu Hurairah, may Allah be pleased with him, who ascribed it back to the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, may Allah be pleased with him, may peace and blessings be upon him, that he said, truly Allah has overlooked for my ummah that which is whispered, or that which is thought about in the lower self, as long as they don't act upon it or speak about it. So I feel that this is like a kind of a exposure prevention therapy in some sense, which is induced by the faith itself, and we directly get it within our faith, which is to ignore these thoughts and do not pay attention to them. So this is something I thought of bringing up, maybe because this can help people who are going through some issue related to faith to understand that these things are also a part of faith, and many people they don't realize, or many people they don't take this seriously. We have this issue within our community that even if they read those narrations, they might not take it seriously. Like, okay, I don't see any kind of relevance to this with what I'm going through. And this is why, you and me, we reinforce the same thing. Might help people to explain to them that what they are going through is something completely normal. Everyone goes through. It's just that they have given more attention to those thoughts, and that has caused a bigger issue for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm really glad that you pointed that out. So, and these are from the Quran, I assume.
It's from the Hadith, narration, which is another religious scripture that we have.
Okay. So what it's doing is it's acknowledging everyone has thoughts, and if they're against your will and you're upset by them, you shouldn't worry about it, which is exactly what we want people, to believe. But as you're pointing out, when people have scrupulosity, they will cherry pick, right? So they will pay attention to certain things and they will overlook other things, even though it says it right there, that it's okay. And it's the same thing in America. Most folks follow the Judeo-Christian Bible, and it's they don't do, the Judeo-Christian Bible doesn't do as good a job. There are things where it says, if you think about committing adultery, then you have committed adultery.
Oh.
Right? If you think about killing your brother, that's as bad as killing your brother. So very rigid. So Christians in particular, they look at that and they say, oh, I should never have any impure thoughts. And we, in our country, we don't have what you're showing me. It would be nice if there was, except that there are parts in the Bible where it says God loves you, God is forgiving, it's okay to have sins, God, you can repent. So all religions do have a way out of that. But again, people cherry pick. People see what they want to see. Again, when you're afraid, when you have a fear, it's natural for us to focus on the threat because that keeps us safe. Back when human beings were living in the days with the saber-toothed tigers roaming around before the saber-toothed tigers went extinct, if there was a big animal roaming around, humans, who are not the largest and fastest and strongest animals, it would be helpful for us to focus on the threat. Otherwise, we would have been eaten alive, right? And we wouldn't be here now. But thankfully, we had this fight or flight system that allowed us to say, oh, there's a saber-toothed tiger, and that's dangerous. And I'm going to focus on that until it goes away. And now you see the same thing, but it's not about a saber-toothed tiger. It's about religion or other things. But it's kind of like their thoughts have become like the saber-toothed tiger. And they're going to discount any information about safety, and they're just going to focus on the negative stuff. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that definitely. And I completely agree to what you're saying. And it is a tough thing. I mean, the solution that we are talking about, I mean, in terms of words, we say that, okay, stop doing that. But for them, a person who's going through it, because he's habitual to that,
right,
it needs a lot of willpower to stop doing it. Even if sometimes they realize they can't directly do it. So I'll give you my own example. When I realized that it was not that, instantly my issue was gone. I realized that, okay, what I'm doing is something that is not even prescribed in my religion. It is wrong. And psychologically, I'm just uh, reinventing the wheel by doing some extra, like these kind of compulsions.
Yeah.
So I took a method where when I'm repeating those acts, I force myself to at least stop within a certain time.
Mhm.
And then it started working, and slowly it went to the point where I got to being normal. In the sense, it it did not happen in a day. I'm trying to explain this to
Oh,
you.
oh yeah.
It takes time.
Yeah.
So can the treatment involve, maybe, like, for example, if a person is reading, he just reads or he just watches debate videos about religion being true or not, we might prescribe him to stop doing that altogether, but that might not practically work. So we can say, okay, if you watch videos for like 10 hours, restrict it to 1 hour and then slowly do that. Or is it like you have to force him to not do it at all? What would work better, would you say?
Yeah. Well, it's different for different people, but you can certainly reduce it gradually. And the therapist, the psychologist, is like a coach. So
Oh,
yeah, when I work with people, I don't want them doing this on their own, because they're not going to do it. They're not going to really lean into it, right? They might like white knuckle through it. What I want to do is I'm going to coach them. So whether they're in my office or whether it's over Zoom, we're going to do this together, and we're going to confront the doubts like we were talking about together, and decide on, yeah, so instead of reading 10 books, you're going to read 9, then 8, and then 7. Or, maybe quicker than that. It just depends on whatever the person's able to do.
okay. So you're trying to say that it depends from person to person. Maybe someone who has a lot of good willpower, maybe you might see him and stop it altogether. And
Right.
that is very effective. For some people, it might not work.
Yeah, that's right. And what's most important is that the person eventually gets there. And if they can do it all at once, or if it takes them a little while, that's okay. We're working toward the goal.
Okay. That's brilliant.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that, I was able to cover many of the things that I had in mind. Now, some of the particular things that I want to ask is, one thing I would like to mention is that, uh, also when it comes to the cure, is there something like, OCD can completely never be cured. Like, you can reduce it down to being negligible. So for example, now also when I wash my hand, I still have, sometimes I have intrusive thoughts. I just don't pay attention to them. So they've become negligible to like they've become so weak to the point where it doesn't bother me at all. So anyone who's going through OCD, do not need to keep this in mind, that the intrusive thought is never going to go. You're just going to try to make it weaker or stronger by doing compulsion or not doing compulsions. Is that how it works?
That's exactly how it works. And the reason they don't go away is that everybody has them. They're normal. And so having the expectation that the intrusive thoughts are never going to come back, that's irrational. So you're like anyone else. Of course, you're going to have these thoughts. And what's changed is your response to them. You're able to see them as just noise, as senseless, rather than like a call to action.
Wow. Okay. The one thing that, so first, before I say that, I know I'm really enjoying this conversation with you.
Me too. Me too. This is fun. Yeah.
So yeah, so I was saying, I was going through Dr. Andrew Huberman's video on OCD, and he gave me a very simple, like, a kind of explanation that there are obsessions that come in. Obsessions bring in some kind of anxiety, and anxiety, to remove that anxiety, you do a compulsion. And within this whole process, the only thing that is in control is you doing the compulsion. The obsession is not in your control, and the anxiety that comes along with the obsession is not in your control. So the thing that you have to work on is just changing the relationship with the anxiety you have.
Yeah.
Maybe you think that the anxiety is something that you have to avoid. and you do compulsions because you're trying to fight that anxiety. But if you don't fight that anxiety, you embrace that and like, okay, I'm okay with living with that anxiety and not doing anything about it, solves the issue. Is that in a very simple, oversimplified manner correct categorization?
Yeah, I agree with that completely. Yes.
Okay, that is brilliant. So just one thing I want to talk about regarding my experience as well.
Yeah.
About the kind of like exposure response prevention, which is not doing anything about those thoughts, how effective and how strong they are, uh, which is also induced by like enforced by religion. Like when I started doing it, I've visited a psychiatrist. Like I was used to visit a psychiatrist, and the second time that I visit the psychiatrist, and then I told them, yeah, my issue is gone. And then the psychiatrist was like, huh? How is it gone? Like, and I'm not paying attention. I'm talking about something else. Like, I like to talk to psychologists and psychiatrists, and I'm asking her about something completely different. And then she's again going back to, no, 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 but go back there, go back there. Like, how is it gone? Like, well, I'm like, no, no, like I stopped paying attention to it. And so she's like, it's like a miracle. I'm like, how can that be a miracle? Like, when I stopped paying attention to it, and this happened like in a few months span, this psychiatrist, for her it was something new, or something uncommon. So is it the case that those people who don't first of all, I want to talk about how exposure prevention is, exposure response prevention, how effective and how strong it is. And then second is when psychiatrists get to know that this is how swiftly a person can be treated, they get shocked. Does that reinforce how strong this method is?
Yeah.
In some sense, for you, like how you see how strong the exposure prevention or exposure response prevention is for you in your clinical work?
Yeah. The techniques work, right? If you are afraid of something, like a doubt, like a thought, and you approach it and lean into it, and you don't do the rituals, you will become less afraid. That's nature. That's science. That's learning, conditioning, fear extinction, we call it, technically. The question is, how much is the person able to really do it? How consistently are they able to do it? How well does the therapist coach the person and develop a plan, that is going to be right for the person? So what I tell people is that this can be really effective, but you get out of it what you put into it. The harder you work at it, the more, and exactly what you're saying, you were able to really, and good for you. I mean, you're pretty special that you were able to do that. Not everyone's able to do that, but you were, to you, this was really important. And so you were willing to have the anxiety and the doubts to see that eventually those don't bother you so much. Not everyone's willing to do that, but those who are, the more you're willing to do that, they have better outcomes.
Wow. So I think so this should reinforce the viewers, anyone who's going through this issue, that the more you take it seriously and the more you do or stop doing, or however we categorize it,
Yeah.
the faster result you would see.
Yes,
with this.
generally, right? It's I would never guarantee it for anybody, but the techniques are based on science. They're based on learning principles that we've known about for 150 years. It's just a matter of how they get implemented.
Okay.
Yeah.
One question I have now is, what are some other supplementary things or things that someone can incorporate in their life which can help them with OCD? Because I think this is also something in your field. So maybe someone who's going through religious doubts, not something related to religion, but other things that they can incorporate which can help them.
Yeah. Well, always it's important, getting good sleep, exercise, eating healthy, social support is really important. Getting support if you're working or in school, making sure that you have support. And so that you don't feel ashamed of having to go through this. Those are all things that are really important. So taking care of yourself in general emotionally, mentally, and then also physically can really go a long way.
Okay, so this is brilliant. You are saying that also taking care of your physical health and all of these things has a real impact. So the more they don't sleep properly, they don't eat properly, that can increase the issue that they go through. And the more they try to focus on those also can help them get in a better state.
Yeah, and that's in an indirect way. If you're not getting sleep, you're going to feel tired. You're going to feel, more irritable. And when these thoughts come up, you're not going to have as much energy to kind of do the therapy and to be able to, get through the challenge of this. So, and it's the same thing if you're, when you exercise, that secretes endorphins in your body and it makes you feel better about yourself and you want to work harder. So those things and social support gives you outlets for, having interactions, and we all need social interactions. As human beings, we're social animals, and that's just very important.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I wish this conversation goes on forever. I'm enjoying most of. Anyway, so we have less time, so I'll try to wrap up the question in some in just some rapid fire questions like that.
Yep.
So sometimes a person who's going through OCD, he might start off with religious OCD, but then the OCD crops into other aspects of their life and other things as well, where now they have they did the OCD increased to the point where now they have issues with locks as well or other things as well.
Yeah.
So not treating OCD, can it increase the issue further?
It can, not all the time, but for some people, it can snowball and get worse. That's true.
Okay. And what kind of how would you say a person who's going through this issue now, he's thinking of what should I do? Can I handle this issue on my own, or do I have to seek professional help? When does a person require professional help, and when can he do it? Can he deal with the issue on his own?
Yeah, good question. I think, if you want to try dealing with it on your own, there are workbooks that can help people to manage. You read the workbook and you do the work, and it's worth trying that. And if you struggle with doing that on your own, then having a professional that you can work with and who can kind of coach you, be your cheerleader, those, that's usually just because of the nature of the therapy, exposure and response prevention. Usually you're going to need help to do that, but some people can do it on their own. So trial and error.
Okay.
Yeah.
And can people, when they have generated OCD, some people say that OCD sometimes is deeper than other mental health disorders. So can a person who's going through OCD develop other disorders like anxiety and depression and other things?
Yeah, sometimes those things are related. So sometimes depression, especially, other anxiety problems, sometimes substance use problems, sometimes. So you do want to be on the lookout. A lot of these mental health conditions co-occur together.
Okay, so a person who's going through OCD may be also going through some other issues as well.
Sometimes, yeah,
Are
often, more than half the time, I would say.
more than half the time? Okay, wow.
Yeah, it's rarer for people to have just OCD and not things like depression and anxiety. That would be rare.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So in terms of treating someone with anxiety, okay, so we told them what the solution for OCD is, and they are also going through anxiety. How can that person have a combined, combined help for or combined solution for the issue?
Yeah. So that's, again, working with a therapist to figure out, like, do we work on the OCD first? Do we work on the depression or anxiety first? And a good clinician can do an evaluation and tell you what's the primary problem and what should be worked on first and second, or can we do it simultaneously? And there are cognitive behavior therapies that can be implemented together at the same time to address different problems at the same time.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So one thing I want to ask you again, so is there something, because I heard somewhere, I read somewhere that there's something known as existential OCD as well. Is there something like that that exists? What that is? Can you explain?
There is. So existential OCD, which has some overlaps with scrupulosity. This is when people have thoughts like, how do I know what's real? How do I know if I'm really real, if the universe is real or just a dream,
Oh,
right? How do I know what my true purpose is in life? Big questions that philosophers have been grappling with for centuries, and we don't have answers. All we have are questions. And, most people, if you study philosophy, these are interesting, right? It's fascinating to think about. When people have existential OCD, it becomes very frightening. And they do the kinds of rituals that we've talked about, analyzing, asking for reassurance, maybe praying, and it becomes something that they engage with out of fear as opposed to interest and curiosity.
wow.
Yeah.
So that is brilliant, and I think this is where people have to understand. Sometimes they think they have a existential issue which they might help themselves by reading a book, and it could just be existential OCD,
Right.
and the solution might be somewhere completely somewhere else which they have not imagined.
Yeah.
Now there's also something known as moral OCD. What that is, which can be closely linked to scrupulosity.
Yeah, again, so you can have scrupulosity, and it's not so much about a religion in particular, it's just about acting morally.
Okay.
When my dog, went to the bathroom on my neighbor's grass, did I clean it up, all the way, or, did I leave some
Wow.
there? And that's the wrong thing to do. If yeah, did I apologize to someone enough? These kinds of things that most people take for granted, but you can, if you start to see it as I'm so immoral, and it's not really immoral, it's not a big deal, then it can develop into OCD.
Wow. So what you're saying is maybe an atheist can also develop moral OCD or existential OCD, and
That's exactly right. That's right. Yeah. So you can have atheists who have scrupulosity, but it's moral scrupulosity and not religious scrupulosity, right? So
wow.
they're worried about doing something that's not right, just not necessarily based on religion. It's just based on their own morals. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So that is kind of very insightful for me.
Yeah.
Now, maybe like, one thing that I want to bring out
And
is,
just to let you know, at 11 o'clock, I have another appointment in about 10, 15 minutes or so. So
yeah.
okay, just so you know.
Yeah, perfect. So I think like, in my mind also I had the same time to kind of like conclude this discussion. So that's brilliant.
Okay.
One thing I bring on this stage is your work, which is also very important to this conversation. Is this is your latest book, if I'm not wrong?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So how can like, what is this book about, and can this book help people who are going through OCD and OCD scrupulosity specifically?
Yeah, I hope that it can. Treatment, as we've talked about, is a challenge, and not everyone does well with therapy, and not everyone is able to find a good therapist. And some people, they don't want to get treatment for whatever reason. And so I wrote this book for all of those people who maybe they've gone through treatment and it hasn't gotten them to where they want to be, or they are, they're afraid of doing treatment, which I can understand. What this book does is it gives people strategies for how to manage living with obsessions and compulsions. How do I get, how do I uh, operate in relationships, with, intimate relationships, and not let OCD get in the way? How do I succeed at work and not let OCD get in the way, or at school? How do I not beat up on myself? How do I not, feel like a burden to others, even though I have OCD? How do I not, feel ashamed? So these are the kinds of things that this book covers.
Wow, that's brilliant. So anyone who's interested and is seeking help, I think this book can help them out. Now there
Yeah.
are other books that you have that you have. I think all of them are brilliant books. But since we are short for time, I mean, we can just give, like, tell people to look for all of your books online. I think there are so many books that you have written on OCD, and I think all of them, I've not read all of them, to be very honest, but I think
I don't
just
expect
by going through some of your work, I think how insightful it is and how helpful it is. I think I can make this strong, bold statement that all of them would be very insightful and very helpful for everyone.
that's
Now,
so nice. Thank you.
so one thing before we end the conversation is, for example, if someone is seeking help, how can they contact you, and can they contact you?
People are welcome to reach out to me, and depending on where in the world you are and my licenses and where I can practice, I'm certainly happy if people have an email question. I will do my best to help them or get them directed in the right direction. And you can look me up on Google. If you Google my name, Jon Abramowitz, Jon Abramowitz, OCD, you can find, my contact information.
Okay, that's brilliant. So they can email you, or any other contact information that you provide, they can contact you through.
Yeah, the best way is email. I'm pretty good with answering emails. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
So one thing, like, before ending the conversation, I think just one thing that I want you to touch on,
Yeah,
is you talk about something like being critical about your own thinking, and this can help you diagnose OCD. What that is?
Yeah.
Just a bit unpack.
Yeah. So as human beings, we are designed to not question our own thinking all the time. If I think something, it must be right. That's just what we as humans, we like to think that we're smart and that we're correct. But we're not. We're not always correct about things. Human beings make mistakes, and including in our thinking. And so what critical thinking is it's a tool for being able to evaluate your own thinking and evaluate other people's thinking. Just because you read something on a website, on social media, doesn't mean that it's true. And so critical thinking is the tools to evaluate critically, to evaluate what other people are saying and what you're thinking yourself, so that you don't fool other people and so that you don't get fooled.
Right.
That's what critical thinking is about.
And they can use critical thinking to critically imagine, like critically examine what they do. For example, if they're just throughout the day just sitting and just fighting with some thoughts in their head, like, think critically about what you're doing. This indicates that you need to seek help.
Exactly.
Is that correct?
That's
okay.
That's a big part of it. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So again, like, in terms of closing statements, I would say that I'm really glad that, I had this opportunity to speak to you. And I think this would benefit many people who are struggling and they don't understand exactly what their issue is. Yeah. We tried with many questions, like, not in a structured way, but still with the back and forth, try to unravel what the issue is, which is a real issue within our communities. Many communities have the same issues, like all of them have the issue. And what I like about your work was that it's not about you have to attack someone's faith altogether, but rather see the deeper issue that's there, and that needs to be treated. So this is where we can, all of us, maybe even from different communities, can come together and see that the issue is something different, which we have to work on.
Absolutely. Well said, Khalid. And it has been a joy to speak with you. It's my honor to speak with you. This has been a lot of fun for me. So thank you for having me.
Most welcome, doctor. And I would look forward, maybe in future, if you have any new book coming, I would love to call you back on this channel.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Take care.
All right. Take care.
Night.
Okay.